This is Learning Coherence, Chapter 2, a series on the architecture underneath professional learning plans. This chapter, why the plan should start with impact, not goals. Chapter 2, start with impact. Here's a question that changes the entire planning sequence. Before you write a single goal, what would it look like if this plan actually succeeded? Not what workshops would you run, not what goals would you set, what would be different in classrooms, in teacher practice, and what students experience every day. If everything this plan promises actually happened, what would you see? I think this is where a lot of planning processes quietly go sideways, and it's subtle because the instinct feels logical. Start with goals, work forward. What do we want to achieve? What strategies will we use? How will we measure it? That makes sense on paper. But what it tends to do in practice is anchor the plan in what's easy to articulate rather than what actually matters. Let me be specific about what I mean by impact, because this is a word that gets used loosely, and it matters to be precise here. Impact, goals, outcomes. These can sound like three words for the same thing. They're not. Each one operates at a different level of the planning architecture, and they do different work. Impact is the vision. It's the broadest frame. What does success look like? Not in your plan document, but in your school. Walk through the hallways, sit in classrooms, watch how teachers collaborate, listen to how students talk about their learning. What's different? Impact sits above the plan and holds everything accountable. You don't measure impact with a single KPI. You describe it, and then you build a system of evidence that tells you whether you're getting there. Goals are more specific. A goal names a particular change you're committing to produce in particular people. Educators will consistently integrate formative assessment into weekly instruction. That's a goal. It targets a specific group, names a specific practice, and implies a specific type of change. Outcomes live inside the logic model, and we'll get to those. But the short version is, an outcome is what changed as a result of a specific activity. It's different from an output, which is what you produced. 450 educators attended is an output. Teaching practice shifted is an outcome. A plan that reports outputs is accounting. A plan that measures outcomes is learning. We'll come back to that. The relationship between these three is directional. Impact comes first. Goals serve the impact vision. Outcomes tell you whether specific activities are producing the changes that move toward your goals. It's a chain. And if you start in the middle, with goals, you can end up with goals that sound right, but don't actually trace upward to a meaningful vision of what's different, or downward to activities that are producing real change. So learning coherence starts with impact, before goals, before strategies, before any structural component. What does success look like across Guskey's 5 levels? And this is where Guskey's framework earns its place. 5 levels of professional development evaluation, and each one asks a fundamentally different question. Level 1, participant reactions. Did educators find value in the learning experience? Was their time well spent? This is the most common thing schools measure. Post-session surveys, satisfaction ratings, and it's real data. It tells you something, but it tells you something narrow. Level 2, participant learning. Did knowledge or skills actually develop? Can someone do something now that they couldn't do before the learning experience? This is where a lot of evaluation stops, levels 1 and 2. Satisfaction and knowledge. And for some purposes, that's enough. Level 3, organizational support and change. This is the one people skip, and it matters more than most realize. Are the conditions in place for people to apply what they learned? Does the schedule support it? Does leadership prioritize it? Are there resources? You can have a brilliant professional learning experience and have it die on arrival if the organization isn't structured to support the application. Guskey's insight here is that organizational conditions are a necessary link in the chain. They don't just happen around the learning, they're part of what makes learning transfer into practice. Level 4, use of new knowledge and skills. Is practice actually changing in classrooms? This is where evaluation gets hard and where most schools stop measuring. Because Level 4 requires infrastructure, observation systems, coaching cycles with documented practice shifts, classroom walkthroughs over time. You can't survey your way to Level 4. It requires someone watching practice, not asking about practice. That's a fundamentally different kind of evidence, and most schools haven't designed the architecture to collect it. Level 5, student outcomes. Are students experiencing something different as a result of these changes in educator practice? This requires linked data, connecting professional learning records to student achievement, to student experience, to the things we actually care about at the end of the chain. Almost nobody measures at Level 5, not because they don't care, because the data systems connecting professional learning to student outcomes simply don't exist in most schools. Here's why starting with impact across all 5 levels changes the planning process. When you name your impact vision, when you say, "Success means we see changed assessment practice in classrooms and improved student engagement with feedback," you've just committed to evidence at levels 4 and 5. Which means your evidence plan can't be just surveys. Your goals can't be just knowledge goals. Your activities can't be just workshops. The impact vision disciplines everything downstream. And when the system generates a plan, it maps impact across all 5 levels, and then checks the rest of the architecture against that mapping. Goals that can't trace to an impact domain get flagged. Impact metrics that only reach levels 1 and 2, when the impact vision describes practice change, get flagged. The gap between what you aspire to and what you're actually set up to measure becomes visible before the plan is finished, not 12 months into implementation, when someone asks, "How do we know this is working?" And the only answer is survey data. Starting with impact isn't harder, it's more honest. And it makes every other component in the plan more purposeful, because each one has to earn its place against what you said success looks like. Which brings us to goals, and why naming the type of change matters so much.